record this meeting before we start. Good. So I am recording this meeting and share my screen. So let me know if the screen is not visible. Alright. Now I am assuming that you spend some time going through the APIs in Node.js. You can go through books. I'm not against it, but as much as time you spend on books, I would recommend you to spend on Node documentation, because you find quite a lot of very useful information that most books oversee completely, right? Spend time on the documentation, try to understand what they offer. Okay, right. Now let us start. So will be all right. So yesterday we discussed about the single-threaded event loop. So what is the complexity and how Node can be used to build IO-bound applications, right? So we discussed about what is the nature of an IO-bound application and how you can make it asynchronous in nature, and in what way it is advantageous to you, right? So one of the most biggest advantages is it takes very less resources for building applications. I mean, for at runtime. They take very less resources at runtime, and obviously the cost that you pay is the complexity with which you build your application, right? Now what we will do, yesterday we also wrote a simple calculator app. We learned about how you modularize your code, how you write package.json, and what is the use of require function, and how you expose your APIs, objects, or whatever they are, using module.exports, right? I'm assuming that you went through this code, and if you have any questions, you can stop me and ask me on those things that we saw yesterday. Okay. Now today, what we will look at is, we will look at file IO at a very minimal level. I'm not going to go very deep. At a very minimal level, what are all the APIs available in file IO? Once again, I'm going to get the help of the documentation, because that is where you find the wealth of information with respect to Node.js. So let's say nodejs.org/API/fs.html. So the FS is the module that exposes file system APIs, right? FS is the module that exposes file system API. So if you want to use file system API, you have to say require FS, right? And then what are all the ways by which you can manipulate it? You can see a lot of methods using which you can manipulate the file system. You can see a lot of methods using which you can manipulate the file system. Creating files, reading files, writing files, removing files, moving files from one place to another place, modifying file access privileges, reading the statistic information about the file in terms of what is the size of the file, what are all the current privileges that it has, etc. Right? The complete information can be obtained using the APIs. But one thing that you will notice is most of the APIs, the last argument is callback. You see here fs.rename callback, fs.truncate callback, fs.truncate ftruncate, fs.ftruncate callback, fs.truncate callback, chown callback, right? fchown callback, and then look at here, right? So all these functions, fs.stack callback. Now the functions that does not have callbacks are the sync ones, right? So by default in Node, all the APIs, most of the APIs will be asynchronous in nature. And when the APIs are synchronous in nature, right, basically you are blocking the thread from proceeding further until the operation is completed. So when you are writing synchronous in nature, the APIs, when you use synchronous APIs, right, they are explicitly mentioned as sync. So this is a convention that Node follows. So if sync is not mentioned, it is assumed that it is by default async. So by default, all the APIs are async, and sync APIs are explicitly mentioned, right? So synchronous APIs are explicitly mentioned. So that is why you won't see a callback in the sync version of the APIs. So fortunately, right, the file system has for most APIs both sync and as well as async version. Even though sync versions are available, you have to think twice before you use it, right? You use a sync version to reduce the complexity in your code, but as I said earlier, if you are writing your application to be used by hundreds of users at the same time, a server application that is being used by hundreds of users at the same time, by using a sync API, you are suspending, right, the execution till the operation completes. And not only you are suspending the execution of your request, you are also suspending the execution of other requests that are waiting to gain attention from the thread, right? So be a little careful when you are using sync APIs, right? It doesn't mean that they are useless. They have their own advantages, and we'll see when we can use them. Okay. All right. Now, how do I use it? How do I use it? So what is the use case here? I just want to read the contents of a file and then write it. That's all. I just want to read the contents of a file and and write on the console, right? So how do I do that? If you look at here, I have fs dot, right? I have methods using which I can read the contents of the file. Fs dot read file. Right? So I can say fs dot read file. Where is it? There it is. Right? So I have two versions available. One is the read file and the other one is read file sync. I can use any of them, and we will see the synchronous reading API, and then we will see how you can use the async reading API. So let us create a simple file. Let me create a new folder. 01 let us create a simple file. So this is data.txt, and what I need is simple contents. Unfortunately, I need to search for this functionality in brackets, the editor that I am using. I don't know if it is available. So we have large file, sorry, this is one reason why I have to come back to Sublime Text. Okay, so let me save this file, and we will say here end of file. So just to know that that's the end of file. Right? So this is our end of file. Good. Now save the file. Now I want to read the file, read and print the file. So let us create a simple file. New file, print file dot base. So what do we want to do? We want to load the file, check the file, and if the file exists, we want to read the contents of the file and print it. So how do you do that? Very simple. First of all, we need the file system API. So I say where fs equal to require fs. Sorry, require fs. So this will give me access to the file system API, and then I want to read the contents. So I'll say fs where file contents is equal to, we are trying to do a sync way, so fs dot read file sync. Fs dot read file sync. What is the name of the file? So let us say the name of the file is data.txt. What I'm doing, so it is data.txt, comma. We have to give some options. So in the options you can specify the encoding. So I can say the encoding is UTF-8, right? Read it as text. And then we will simply say console.log file contents, and we will just print it. I think we are done now, right? And let's see. Two, and then cd file operations. Now we have printfile.js. So I'll simply say node printfile.js. You have the file being read and printed. Right, the file being read and printed. Okay, so now I want to do the same thing in async fashion. I want to do the same thing in async fashion. So how can I do the same thing in async fashion? So what we can do, we will write something like this: file And as I said earlier, right? As I said earlier, this will not wait. This will not return the data, right? Your execution is not suspended, right? When you try to read the file. So how do you want to process that? So you pass a callback. So function, and when you pass a callback, right? Usually the convention in Node application is that most callbacks follow this standard pattern. The pattern is you pass basically when the callback is invoked with two arguments. One is error. First argument will be error, and then you will have any number of arguments. And in our case, we will have the data. Okay. Now here you can take this and put it here. Now save this. Go back. Try to read the file. It says file contents is not defined. Sorry, it is data. It is data. Clear this and this. We have the file being entered. Right? So you did the same thing. More or less, you did the same thing. But you, instead of reading the file and instead of triggering the file read operation and waiting for the read operation to complete, what you did is basically you passed a callback to it, and then you allowed the callback to be executed at a later point of time. Is it really executing at a later point of time? You will check, right? Now, when this line of code is executed, so let me ask you this question. So console.log file reading is completed, right? When I say console.log file reading is completed, what do you think is the sequence it will be printed? Will it be will it print the data and then print file reading is completed, or it will print file reading is completed and then it will print the data, right? The second one is the right answer. Why? Because the callback will be executed. Okay. You are going out now, or you are coming back? Okay, I think he left. Right? Now you see here, the file reading is complete. The file reading is completed prints first. Why? Because this will be, the callback will be executed. So basically what happened, when you executed the thread triggered this process, right? The thread triggered this process, and by passing a callback function. So internally the file reading is happening. But because it is an async API, you are not waiting for the file reading operation to complete. You immediately come here and execute this line. So that is why you find the callback executing at a later point of time, right? That is why you find the callback executing at a later point of time, right? So you print the data. Very good. I'm assuming that you are following. Let me know if you are not. Right? A very basic stuff. Very basic stuff. Now, of course, we can do a lot more things. You can watch for files, you can write files, you can read files. You can do a lot more things. I'm not getting into those things at this point of time. We will see in detail about how to manipulate files and what you can do with those file APIs in a little more complex use case, right? Sometime tomorrow or next week. But for now, right, whatever we want to accomplish, this is more than sufficient. Right? Whatever we want to accomplish, this is more than sufficient. Okay, very good. File writing is done. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to create a simple web server. So let us create that. So new folder, open folder, oops, sorry, cancel. Right, I want both of them. Right, so here is our web server. So let me create a simple file called server.js. Now, as usual, as I said yesterday, you need to have package.json file for each of your modules. So here, this is a module, this is a module. So for each of your modules, you need to have package.json file. But in the interest of time, I'm just proceeding without creating any package.json file. Now, let us create a simple HTTP server. So how can I create a HTTP server? Once again, if you look at it, node.js.org/API/http.html, you will find that there is an API by name HTTP, right? There is a module by name HTTP that exposes APIs using which you can create both a server and as well as a client. You can create a HTTP server and as well as an HTTP client. For now, we will look at HTTP server, and later we will look at how you can create a HTTP client. I am planning to write a simple screen scraper using Node as a part of our case study, right? So that will give us a broader picture, broader problem to solve in Node.js, right? After building a simple web application using Express. So there we will see how you can use HTTP as a client, right? There we will see how you can use HTTP as a client. For now, what we will do is we will see how you can create a server using HTTP. Now, when you look at the API, you see here there is a method called http.createServer to which you pass a request listener. So the request listener is a function. So is a function which is automatically added to the request event. So you can, what you can do, you can handle the requests and responses using that particular callback function. Okay. Now let us create one. So where http equal to request http, right? And then I'll say http.createServer, pass a function. So this is your server. So this returns a server. This returns a server object, and you pass a function. And in this function, you say, hey, I want to access something, right? Now this function, whenever this function is invoked, it means that a new connection is established, right? It means that a new connection is established. And then obviously, right, when a connection is established, one of the reasons why you might want to do is processing the incoming request and thereby deciding what need to be the response, right? Processing the incoming request and thereby deciding what need to be the response. So when this function is invoked, you are given with references to the request and response object, right? In fact, if you want, what you can do, you can print the console.log the arguments. So that will give you, right, that will give you the complete arguments information that are being passed to this this one, to the callback. Now let us make the server listen. So server.listen on port 9090, and then say console.log server listening on port 9090, right? I think we are done. So we haven't returned any response, but we have built a web server that can listen to incoming requests. So let us do this. cd 02 log. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So now Node, whatever is the server. Now you have a server listening on port 9090, right? Now you can access it from the browser. So let's go to the browser and say localhost :9090, and now you'll find that it will be going on forever. It will not stop for quite some time. Why? Because you haven't ended the response, right? You haven't stopped the connection. But here, if you look at it, it says goes, right? A new connection is established, and then you have an arguments object. So you have one argument 0, and there is one more argument called 1, right? So there are two arguments that are getting passed. There are two arguments that are getting passed to this particular function, and those are nothing but request and response, right? Those are nothing but request and response. So what you can do, you can receive those arguments, request and response objects, and you can decide what you want to happen when this comes. What we will do, let us write some response. I'll say response dot write h1 equal to node. Welcome to node, right? And then we have to end this, otherwise it will still be running, right? The connection, the server doesn't know, the client won't know when it has to stop listening for the data. So we have to explicitly end this, and once you do this, right? Once you do this, because end the server, let's go back here, reload this, you get welcome to Node.js, and you have 2 connections established. Right? That is interesting. I just refresh the browser only once, and it says there are 2 connections established. Why are those 2 connections established? Let us look at this same thing from Firefox. Is there something to do with the browser? Let us give it a shot. So from Firefox, I hit this, I got welcome to Node, and here also I see, oops, here I see 3 connections. Right, here I see 3 connections. So what the hell is happening here? Okay, now if you want to know what is the request coming in, why are there are 3 requests coming in, right? What we will do, let us try to print the URL of the request to understand what is being requested. Right, let us try to print the URL of the request to understand what is being requested. So here I'll remove the console.log. Here I'll say console.log request URL is equal to comma request.url, right, comma request.url. Now we need to restart the server again and again and again. Whenever you make changes to the application, you need to restart the server again and again and again. Are you with me? But there is a simple trick which you can use to avoid restarting the server, because someone else will do the job for you. Okay, someone else will do the job for you. So how you can do it, I'll explain you later. But for now, let us manually restart the server, and let's go back here. Let me reload the browser. Now look at, okay, so here is the culprit. Right, the browser is making a call to favicon.ico so that it can display the favicon. So this guy, right, the green hexagon is there, right? So that is that is your favicon. So every website is expected to have one, right? So that is what the browser is doing. The Chrome what it does, it is making a call to favicon.ico. Now you get an idea, right? So this is, now what you have done is you have built a web server, right? Even though it is useless, even though it is absolutely useless, you have built a web server. So what is a web server? A web server is a server that keeps running, listening on HTTP requests on a particular port and giving proper HTTP responses, right? And whether the response is the right response or not, that's a different story altogether. But is it sending a response? Is it receiving incoming requests, right? So now look at this. Even if I say /index.html, nothing happens. It still gives me welcome to Node.js. Are you with me? Right? So it doesn't matter what it responds, but it is responding with some contents. So it is a web server, right? It is a web server. Just give me 1 minute. I'll be back. Just give me 1 minute. Sorry. Alright, so it is making a request for favicon.ico, and it is not really bothered about what the user is asking. It is simply responding with the same contents. It is simply responding with the same contents. Now what we have to do, we have to make the server respond appropriate contents. Right? Now we have to make the server respond appropriate contents. So how do you do that? How do you do that? What is the appropriate content? Appropriate content is basically if a request is made for /index.html, read the contents of the file and write it to the response string. And if the file exists, do this. If the file does not exist, simply write a 404 response to the send a 404 response to the user so that he can understand, the browser can understand that the file, the resource does not exist. Right? So this is what we are supposed to do. Now we will do it one step at a time. First we will read the contents of the file and write it, and then we will go for first we will try the happy path, and then we will try the failure conditions, right? False conditions, so that we can see how we can write our code. Now, how will I know what is the resource? Now we know that the resource is accessible through request.url. Right? The resource is accessible through request.url. Okay. Now shall we try to read the contents of the file and directly print it? Let us try that. When I say when you receive the resource, right? Let's not write it to the response. Let us just try to read it and print it. We will create a file system. So where fs is equal to require fs, and we'll say fs dot read file, whatever we did earlier, read file request.url, comma, what is the object? Encoding is UTF-8. Okay, very good. And then what do I want to do with the response? So here error comma data. Now here I'll simply say console.log request.url. Data, right? Console.log request.data. Now, obviously there is absolutely no relationship between these two, but nevertheless, let us try what is happening. I like to go one step at a time. So we have this, and do we have the index.html file? We don't seem to have an index.html file. We will create a plain simple index.html file, and here we say Node.js intro, and welcome to Node.js, right? And a div where you can write this file is served by web server return in Node.js, right? Now save this file. Now let me restart the server, and then let's go as for index.html. Right? We got this, and it says undefined. Right? It says undefined. So why is it saying undefined? What is it attempting to do? Let us try to check whether the file exists. Right? Let us just try to check whether the file exists. Console.log fs.existsync. Right? Existsync, pass the file URL request.url fs.existsync, pass the URL. Now let us go restart this once again and go index.html. What does it say? It says it is false. It says it is false. So what is the problem? The problem is it is trying to find the file in some other location. So we need to tell Node that it has to look for the file in the current location. Right? It has to look for the file in the current location. So how do you do that? Right? Probably what we can do, we can check the error. Right? We can check the error. So if error, basically if there is something in the error, we will simply say console.log error. Otherwise else we will say console.log data. Make sense? Right? So this is the use case for the first argument. So if at all the reading operation fails for some reason, right? If the reading operation fails for some reason, the callback will be invoked with the error information populated as the first argument. Right? The callback will be invoked with the error information populated as the first argument. Right? So you can always check in your callback. This is how it has to be always written. Right? You cannot assume that the callback or the operation will always be successful. There can be more than one reason why it can be a failure. So you always need to check if it is an error in your callback, and if it is an error, you handle it one way, and if it is not an error, you handle it in a different way, right? So this is a common pattern that you will find in Node.js applications. Now let me start the server once again and start index.html. You've got this, but it says error open d:\index.html, right? Do you understand? Right? No entry. Error no entry. So error no entry means the file does not exist. There is no file. Look at the path. It is looking at d:\. Right? It is looking at d:\. Why? Because I was running it from the D drive. Okay? So that is why not because of that. Look at the URL. So what was the URL? Did you notice what was the URL? So let me say console.log request.url. Console.log request.url. Say this, stop this, go back, and this once again. Now what is the URL? The URL is /index. So when you say /index, right, when it is mapped against the file system, you get the root. And the root in my case is D drive. So that is why it says the file not found. Okay. So what am I supposed to do? I have to tell the server program that it has to look for a file in the current directory. Right? It has to look for the file in the current directory. So how do I know what is a current directory? There is a global variable, right? There is a global variable available in Node that will give you the current directory information. And all such global variables are under globals, right? If you just look at the document API, there is one API called globals. So it is not actually a API. It means that it is this object and its methods, these functions are all available throughout the application. You don't have to explicitly import anything to use it. See here, these objects are available in all modules. Some of these objects aren't actually in the global scope, but in the module scope, this will be noted, right? So one of them is __dar name. So let us look at what is __ dar name. The name of the directory that the currently executing script resides in, right? The name of the directory where the script resides in. So what we need to do? We need to map the path with this guy, right? We need to map the path with this guy. So let us do that. So we'll say where resource is equal to __ dar name plus request.url, right? And then we will do a console.log. I'll show you how you can debug it a bit later, right, and subsequent sessions, but for now let us use console.log as our debugging methodology. I know it is very primitive, but it's easy, right? You can very easily debug it. So console.log, whatever is our resource, right? And then here, instead of request URL, what am I supposed to do? All these things need to be replaced with resource, right? All these things need to be replaced with resource. Now let us rerun the application. So let us rerun the application and go to index.html and hit this. Now it says, look at the file, it still says not found. It still says not found. But what is the problem? The problem is, look at the path, right? So here it is d:\training Spring People Node blah blah blah. But the slashes are windows slashes, which are all backslash. Whereas this is a forward slash, because forward slash is what you use in your HTTP, right? So that creates some problems. Right? So what we will do, right? So what we will do, we will have to connect these two, right? The directory name and the request URL in an appropriate way, in an OS agnostic way, right? So how can I connect it in an OS agnostic way? Let us see if there are any APIs that can assist us with this problem. Now, if you look here, right, there is one by name path. Now, what is the role of the path? What path does? This module contains utilities for handling and transforming file paths. Almost all these methods perform only string transformations. The file system is not consulted to check whether paths are valid, right? So that need to be done. So this guy doesn't check whether the paths are valid. You have to take care of it. Okay. Now look at that. Here you will find one method called join, path.join. So what you can do, you can have multiple path fragments. It will neatly join, right? So it won't it will resolve forward slash, backward slash, two forward slashes. All those things will neatly be resolved, and then it will give you the appropriate path that is valid, right? That is safe to use. So we will use that. So for that, once again, what am I supposed to do? I am supposed to say where path equal to where path. We will do this, and then I'll show you how you can refactor this code to better. So now I'll say path dot, right, join. So path dot join these two. What are they? Their name, comma, the request.ui, right? Now you do the resource and check whether the resource exists, and based on that you can perform whatever you wanted to perform. So shut this down, restart this. Let's go back to the browser and hit index.html. You got it. Now let's come here. The fav icon still does not exist, right? The fav icon still does not exist. But where is the index.html? Why am I not seeing index.html? So fav, there it is. The index.html is here, right? The index.html is red, and the doc type HTML, blah blah blah. You have the complete contents available, right? You have the complete contents available. Now, what we will do, if the file exists, we will write the file to the server. If the file does not exist, write the file to the browser. If the file does not exist, we will simply send a 404 status code, right? So let me close this. Let's come here. Now, anyway, we have the file check done here, right? So what I can do, I will simply say if this exists, what do I want to do? Now, do this, right? So do this, and do this. Else, if the file does not exist, what am I going to do, right? I am going to send a status code. So I'll say response.status code is equal to 404 and response.end. And here, if it is an error, right, we will end up writing a lot of if-then logic, so don't worry about it. So here I'll say if it is an error, then I'm going to say set the status code. Otherwise, what am I going to do? I'm going to say response.write whatever is the file contents that you have read, right? Whatever is available from the callback, you read that, and then you simply say response.end, right? And then you simply say response.end. And don't do this. Don't do this, right? Why? Because we are no more sending static response. We are looking at whatever as the resource that are requested, and based on the resource that are requested, we read the contents and then write it to the response, right? Now let me save this file. Let us restart the server. And then let's go here, say index.html. There you go. Now we say welcome to Node.js. This file is served by a web server written in Node.js, which is your HTML page, right? So which is the contents of your HTML, right? Which is the contents of your HTML page. Does it make sense? I don't know if I have gone too long, too fast. So what I will do is I'll check in this code. You guys have a look at it and take a few minutes, go through it, and let me know if you have any questions. Right? Primitive web server. Right? This is in no way a decent web server. This is in no way a decent web server. Okay? So this is a very primitive web server. Why? Because a web server should abide by the specifications of HTTP, right? A web server becomes a web server only if abides by the specifications of HTTP. And unfortunately, right, we don't do anything other than writing the contents, right? We don't do anything other than writing the contents. Make sense? The code is checked in, so have a look at it and let me know if you have any questions. By no means this code is good, right? This is ugly. The code is ugly. But the goal here is not to write efficient code or good code. The goal here is to learn how do you code in Node.js. Okay, so have a look at it and let me know if you are following. I'll wait for 10 minutes. Thank you, Pablo. Is this checked in? Of course, yes, I did. Are you not finding it? Oh, sorry. Get the form/repositories. I did check in just now. Then why did I check in that? Oh, sorry. You should have. I'm sorry. Yeah. I did commit, but I didn't push it. I forgot to push it. So it's there. It's there. So I'll give you a few more minutes. Please go through it. All right. Now this is where things get a little interesting. Let us look at this code, right? So is this code really good? Now it depends. So how does it depend? Depending on the size of the file, right? So let us do this. Let us try experimenting with the fs.read file. Okay, let us try experimenting with the fs.read file and see how many batches it takes to read the contents of the file. And for that, I might have to create a large file. So let me take a data.txt file, remove this line, copy this, paste it, copy this, paste it. Right, so I am creating a reasonably large file. There are 1751 columns are there, rows are there. So let us create a big file. Right, so we have created a big file here, and let us see what is the size of the file. Now, D2 file operations. The file is 6 MB. Right, the file is 6 MB. I'm just going to take a copy of this. Actually, you know what? We'll make it a little more bigger. Right, we'll make it a little more bigger. Still copying. Sorry, I did a complete copy paste. Perfect. Right, now you'll find the file is around . Right, so look at the file. It's around 12 MB. It's around 12 MB. Now what we will do, we will look at the print file and see how many times it is actually reading the file, right? How many times it is actually reading the file. We are doing this read file data.text, right? Now, when you do this, right? When you do this, what actually happens? The file is being read. The data is read again and again and again in multiple chunks, and they are held in the memory before the complete file is read, and then once the complete file is read, it actually executes this function. But till that time, right, the contents are cached in the memory, right? Till that time the contents are cached in the memory. Now I'll later take you through how you can profile your application to understand what is the memory usage of your application, right, and how much it uses the memory, CPU, etc. But for now, right, it is very obvious that if it reads the whole contents, it has to read in one shot. If it is not reading in one shot, it is reading it in multiple shots, and then it is printing it. Okay, but then how will I know? How will I know? So what we will do, we will, instead of using the read file, we will use a stream. Right, so you know streams. You might have been working in Java, so you know streams. So streams represents the flow of data, right? So what we will do, we will solve the same problem using streams, and that will give us an insight into how many times the read operation has been being performed. So instead of this, I will use a stream. How do I use a stream? Where stream is equal to fs dot create read stream, right? There is an API called create read stream, to which you can pass what is the file name. So I'll say data.text and then an options. So the options is encoding is UTF-8, right? The options is encoding UTF-8. Okay, so you're opening the stream. Now the stream triggers events using which you can access the contents of the file. Right? So what are the events that the stream triggers? It triggers an open event, it triggers a data event, it triggers a close event, an end event, and it triggers a error event. Right? So these are all the events that it triggers. How do I know? Once again, let's look at the documentation. So it is readable stream. So let us take fs. Let us take fs and look at fs dot create read stream path and options. When you do this, it returns a readable stream, right? And what the readable stream does, the readable stream emits events using which you can receive the data, right? So what are the events that it emits? These are all the events that it emits. Data is one event, and end is another event, and close is another event, error is another event. So these are all the events that it emits. Using which you can access using which you can understand the state of where the stream reading operation is, right? What is the state of the stream reading operation? So right, so let us do this. Let's go back here. Now I want to read the contents of the file, and in the meanwhile I also want to track how many number of times the file is being read. So I'll create a variable where read count is equal to 0, and every time the data event is triggered, I'm just going to keep incrementing the count. So stream dot on data, right? Now what is this on? On is a generic purpose method. It's not a generic purpose method, I'm sorry. It is the method using which you subscribe to the events, and every API that emits an event can be subscribed using on, right? Every event that emits an event, every API that emits an event can be subscribed using on. How all the APIs follow the same signature? Because all those events that emit events inherit from events API, right? They all inherit from events. It's a mix-in. So if you look at here, you have the events, right? You see here event.on, once, remove listener, remove all listeners, max listeners, etc., 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 right? So emitter.emit. So now these are all what you are subscribing to, and internally it triggers the event using the emit method. We will see, right? I'll show you how you can create your own API that can emit events like what the stream does, right? We will have to take a slightly complex problem to do that. We will do it tomorrow, day after tomorrow. For now, right? We know what is the origin of the on. So how does it matter? If you look at the readable stream, right? So let's go to API docs, locate FS, or locate the stream, and inside the stream, you see, stream.readable, event readable, data, end, close, error. So if you look at stream.readable, right, interface is the abstraction of source of data, and a readable will not start emitting the data, blah 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 blah, and there has to be some place where it says it is inherited from events. Where is it? I think they changed the documentation a little bit. So they used to have it, now it doesn't seem to. Okay, that's okay, right? Now we will use it and then see how that impacts. So on data function, take the data and then simply say what is the data dot length, right? So we will say what is the total file size. So where total file size is equal to 0. We will simply keep incrementing the total file size. So total file size plus equal to data dot length, and then we will also increment the read count, right? How many times the file is being read. We will also increment the read count, and if needed, we will also print the data. So console.log whatever is the data that you have read. Okay. So console.log data. Now, when should this stop, right? What am I supposed to do when something completes? So stream.end. So stream.onEnd, I want to do something. Basically, when the reading operation completes, I want to perform something. What is it? Print the total size. So console.log file size is equal to, comma, total file size. And then we will also say console.log the read count is equal to, comma, read count, right? Read count equal to read count. Now we will say console.log reading file. Console.log reading file. So now we have a slightly complicated implementation just to show how many times the read operation is happening, right? How many times the read operation is happening. Let's go back. Let's go to file operations, and then let us simply say node print file, right? Node print file.js. Print this. It is reading, and end printing because the file is a little huge. And at the end of it, we will see the stats in terms of how much has been read and what is the size of the data, and then what is how many times the read operation actually occurred at the OS level, right? Did I create this big? Okay. Now, how many times the read operation happened? 193 times, right? So your file was so huge, right? 12 MB file. So your file was so huge. 12 MB or 12 KB? Looks like it is a little huge. Let's say it was KB or MB. Oh, okay. So 12 MB. Sorry. Right? So 12,000 KB, which is 12 MB. So the file is so huge that it performed 193 read operations. Basically, the data was collected 193 times and then cached in the memory and then served, right? So when you do this, right, this is what internally happening, right? This is the problem with Node. Every time you use an API, right, the API is async. Just because the API is async, it doesn't mean that you are doing it the right way, right? And you need to think in terms of how internally Node will perform the operation, and then based on that, right, you need to align your implementation. So here, the fs.read file, right, internally might be reading the contents multiple times and then accumulating it in the memory before it is actually written, right? Before it is actually written. Now the question is, how many do all operations that you want to perform on the data warrant the complete data to be cached before you start acting on it, right? Now it depends, yes or no? Now, if you are performing, say for example, you have a large data file, and you have to perform some aggregation logic, right? And that logic or transformation, whatever it is, right? So, and that logic involves the complete data to be available. Unless the complete data is available, it is difficult to implement that logic or aggregation or transformation logic, right? If that is the case, it justifies the fact that you read the whole contents of the file and accumulate them in the memory. But what are we doing here? We are simply reading it and writing it to the response stream. Yes or no? Right? We are simply reading it and writing it to the response stream. So does it really require, if the file size is huge, right? Do I have to really cache it? Now, if there are let's assume that a reasonably big file, right? A reasonably big file, a 10 KB file or a 20 KB file, a reasonably big file, and only one user, its impact will not be huge. But when the same application is being used by hundreds of users at the same time, right? Unnecessarily, you will be clogging the memory with the file contents loaded before being returned to the response stream without adding any value, right? Without adding any value. So what is the solution? The solution is very simple. Even though just because you are using an async API, it doesn't mean that you are reading it right. You are doing it right? So understand what is internally happening and understand your scenario, what you are trying to do, and then make the try to use the best approach. And in this case, the right way to do it is using the Stream API, so that I don't have to cache the data in the memory, right? Even if the runtime does it, even if the Node runtime does it, we can avoid Node doing it, right? By using the right API. So how would you do that? Let us rewrite this logic using streams, right? Let us rewrite this logic using streams. How? Very simple. I'll say where stream is equal to fs dot create read stream. Create read stream. What is the name of the file? So it is the resource, right? It is the resource, and then an options. So you can say encoding is UTF-8, right? Encoding is UTF-8. Very good. And once you open the string, what do you have to do? You will have to simply keep writing the data. So you will say stream.on data. What do you want to do? Function. Your callback will be invoked with the data read, and you can say response.write the data. And then when it completes, right? So stream.on end, then you take a function, and right. So here you simply say the end also comes with data. Let us look at that. Readable stream event end. Yeah, it doesn't come with any data. So we will say when it ends, simply say response dot end. Right? Simply say response dot end. And if there is an error, so stream dot on error. Right? Guys, I'm using double quotes, but it is strongly discouraged. So somehow I developed this habit of using double quotes. So when you are writing code in JavaScript, you should always use single quote for strings, because double quotes has a different meaning. It is part of your JSON standard, so you are not supposed to use double quotes in your code. But bear with me, I got used to it, so I find it very difficult to change. I'll try to change. Okay. So now function. So when error is triggered, so what happens? So when the error is triggered, right? An error object emitted if there was an error receiving the data, right? So you can simply say if there is an error receiving the data, simply say response dot status code is equal to 004 and response dot end and response dot end. Now we have written our code in a reasonable way, right? So that we are making the best use of the resources that are available. So save this file. Let's go back. Let's reload the file. So cd 02 web server and node server, right? Node server. I'll go back. Let us try to access the file. And does it still serve? It serves perfectly well, right? It serves perfectly well. And we will say try to access abc.html. You got what you have requested for is abc.html. Now look at the what is it? Control Shift J. Look at the Chrome console. What do you say? Failed to load resource. The server responded with the status of 404 not found. Right? So reload this. You will see that resource here. abc.html 404 not found. Right? So that's how you deal with this. Make sense? Right? Now here, are we transforming the data in any way? When I read the data from the stream, and before writing the data to the response stream, right, file stream, I read the data from the file stream and write the data to the response stream. But when I do that, right, am I transforming the data? Am I transforming the data in any way? Right? Absolutely not. I'm not transforming the data in any way. Right? So what can we do? The beauty is the streams expose a method called pipe. So that connects the streams with the writable streams. So if you look at the pipe, right? So calling the pipe method to send data to the writable, right? Calling the pipe method to send data to the writable. So where is the pipe method? Readable.pipe destination. The destination has to be a writable stream, and your HTTP response is a writable stream. Okay, your HTTP response is a writable stream. So what you can do, you can simply pipe the contents, the readable stream with the writable stream. So how do you do that? Very simple. All I have to do is, you don't even need to do this if you are not going to do any data transformation. You can simply say stream.pipe the response, and you are done. Right? Stream.pipe equal pipe response, and you are done. Right? Let us shut this, restart this. Let's go back to the browser, try to access the file index.html. You got it, right? And try to access abc.html. Now you get a 404 response. Right? It works perfectly fine with very little. Right? So if you know how to use Node, you can accomplish a lot of things with just a few lines of code. Right? Do you understand? Any questions? Guys, any questions? I'm assuming that you don't have any questions. Shall I proceed? Okay. All right. Now, how do you convert this into an application server? How do you convert this into an application server? So what do you mean by an application server here? You remember yesterday we wrote the calculator. I want that calculator to be accessible. I want that calculator to be accessible through the browser, right? The user should be able to use the calculator from the browser, right? So we are just trying to increase the scope of this application, right? So this will bring us a lot of interesting challenges, and we can explore a lot of APIs. So that's what I intend to do. So the goal is this: the user should be able to say http://localhost/calculator, right? Calculator and question mark, right? Operation equal to add, n1 equal to 100, n2 equal to 200. So when you hit this, you should be able to add those two values and then give the result to the user, right, as HTML. And then you need to give the result to the user as HTML. So how do you do that? How do you do that? Now, what are all the things that we have to do in order to achieve this? What are all the things, right? So what is our pseudocode? The pseudocode is this. Number one, check if the request is for a static resource, right? If it is for a static resource, if for static resource, if so, right? If yes, then read the resource, write the resource, serve the resource. I'll simply say serve the resource, right? Now here, this involves the check for the existence as well. You check whether the file exists or not, the resource exists or not. If the resource does not exist, you are going to send a 404 response. If the resource exists, you are just going to read the contents of the resource and write it to the response stream like the way we did, right? Like the way we did. So handle non-existent scenarios. So handle non-existence scenario. Right? So all these things you handle that. Okay. Otherwise, else, if the request is for/calculator. If it is for calculator, for if s, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to parse the request, right? So parse the request URL and extract the data and calculate and serve the response, right? Fine. Else it is not /calculator, right? If it is not /calculator, then what am I supposed to do? Send a 404 status code, right? Send a 404 status code. Very simple. So if the request comes for a static resource, you check whether the resource exists. If the resource exists, then you read the contents of the resource and write it to the response string. If the resource does not exist, you check, if it is not a static resource, you check if the request is for /calculator. If it is so, then you handle it in a slightly different way, right? So now there are a few things that we have to do here. Number one, what is the criteria for a static resource? Right? What is the criteria for a static resource? Now, the criteria for a static resource is if a resource name ends with an extension, right? If a resource name ends with an extension, then I am going to treat that as a static resource. So what is the extension, right? So what is the extension that we are talking about? The extensions are, we'll say where static resource extensions are, what are they? Let us put it in an array. .html, comma, txt, comma, .js, comma, .jpg, comma, .png, comma, .ico, comma, .css, right? So these are all some of the some of the extensions, right, that represents a static resource. These are all some of the extensions that represent a static resource. Okay, very good. Now how will I check whether the resource is a static resource or not? Let us write a simple utility function that does that. So function is static resource. Is static as a resource, right? Is static as a resource. So now first of all, what am I supposed to do? I am supposed to extract the URL, extension from the URL, right? The resource path. So I'm supposed to extract the extension from the given string and then check against the array of static resource extensions that we have. And if it falls under any of this, we are simply going to treat it as a static resource. So how will I know what is the extension, right? How will I know what is the extension? How will I extract the extension? You can do string parsing, but you don't have to go to that level. Why? Because the path API has a method using which you can extract only the extension. So if you go to path.html, there is a method called extName, right? There is a method called extName that returns only the extension. So what we will do, we will use that. So where extension, resource extension, name it better. So resource extension is equal to path.extName of the resource. Okay, very good. And we are able to extract the extension. And what is the next thing that we have to check? We have to check whether that exists in that particular array. So you can use index of. So return, right, static resource extensions dot index of resource extension, right? If it exists, it is not going to be -1. So if it is not equal to -1, it means that it exists, right? As simple as that. A very simple 4-line code that will tell you whether the resource is a static resource or not. Okay, very good. Now, what we'll consider to be the URL path, right? If you look at here, we have a couple of dilemma here. What is it? If the request comes for a static resource, it will be something like this: http://localhost:9090/index.html. Okay. But if it is for the calculator, it will be something like this: http://localhost:9090/calculator question mark, right? OP operation equal to add ampersand n1 equal to 10 ampersand n2 equal to 20. Now the URL will represent the whole stuff, right? And obviously you cannot subject the whole stuff for checking the extension. What do you need to check? You need to check only this. Why? Because in order to break your application, what someone can do, someone can simply say question mark ID equal to 1. Now you will end up taking the whole stuff as the URL, the whole string as an URL, and check whether it is an static resource or not, right? Static, whether the extension is static resource or not. Obviously that will break the application. Now what do we need, right? What we need is a way by which this URL is parsed and I get meaningful information about this string. So when I say meaningful information, what are they? I have to get what is a path. I have to get what is a protocol. I have to get what is a domain. I have to get what is a port. I should be able to get what are all the query strings, right? What are all the values that are passed as query strings. Now, if you want, of course, you can very well write this code. You can write code. I mean, this is a fantastic exercise. What you can do, write a simple URL parser in JavaScript. So given a URL, it should automatically parse all the information and then give it to you as an object, right, that contains all meaningful information. The object should contain an attribute called path. The object should contain an attribute called host. The object should contain an attribute called port. The object should contain an attribute called protocol. It should also contain an attribute called query that will give you this information, right? So you can write a parser. A string parser that can do this job, right? But you don't have to, right? In Node, you don't have to. Why? Because that is already available. Where is it available? There is one more API module called URL, right? There is one more module called URL. So the URL module has a method called parse. So when you call, when you call URL.parse, it gives you the complete information. What does it give you? It returns you an object that contains the complete information. So how do you test it? How do you verify this? We will try this. What we can do? We can use the nodes REPL loop, right? The command line interface to verify how this works. Now I'll simply say node. Okay, so now we are in the interactive mode. So I say 1 plus 2, it gives me 3. Very good. Now let us create a variable that contains this string. So let me say copy this and let me say where URL string is equal to paste this. Right, URL string equal to paste. Very good. Now you have got a URL string. Now we need the URL module available so that you can parse it. So I'll say where URL equal to require URL. Right, require URL. So has it loaded properly? We will check. So type of URL, it says it is an object. So which means it has loaded properly. So look at URL. It is an object that contains all these methods, properties and methods. And there are no attributes. There are no properties. All of them are methods, right? You have the parse method. So that is what we are going to use. So what we will say where results is equal to URL.parse the URL string, whatever we already have. Now look at the result. So this is an object. See what it did, right? It neatly extracted the complete parsed the complete string and extracted enough information for your application and collected them as a single object and returns to you. Now this contains everything, right? Say for example, what we are looking for is actually the path name, right? So this is what we are supposed to check against whether it is a static resource or a an application URL, right? So even if you take this, so let us take this guy. Let us take this guy and then say our URL string is equal to paste it, right? URL string and paste it and say once again repeat the same thing. What is it? Where result equal to URL.parse. Now look at the result. Look at the path name. The path contains /index.html id equal to 1, but the path name contains only the till the resource, right? Everything before the question mark, everything before the query string, right? Now this is what will be of very much use to us if we try to understand whether the resource is a static resource or not. So how do we do that? In our code, first we will try to extract the information. So we will say where URL equal to, right, URL dot parse what? The request dot URL. Now this is your object, okay? So like this is your object and you are directly getting it. Now you can check if it is a static resource. So if is static of the URL dot path name, then do all this stuff. What all the stuff? All this stuff, right? Do all this stuff. Else, what am I going to do? I'll simply say response dot write the requested resource is not a static resource, and response dot end. Right, is not a static resource, and response dot end. Now what is this URL? This you need to load it. Actually this is a little problem, so give me a proper name to this. I'll say requested URL, right? So requested URL, I'll use the requested URL here, the requested URL dot path name. And this will also be right, if it is a static resource, I'll say where resource, yeah, we already have it. Now this has to be requested URL dot path name, right? So see how many places we are changing it. So if you are changing the code in more than one place, maybe there is definitely better scope for refactoring. Okay, so let us save this. Go to the console and run this. So node server.js. There you go. And now let us load this guy. Let us try to load index.html. Do we have index.html? Most likely we have. Let's say index.html. We don't have, is it? We have index.html. We have index.html, but what is the problem? There is an error, url.parse. Why? Because we did not load it. We did not load it. Now here, see, once again I'll say var URL, var this, var that, etc., etc., etc. Now when you code in JavaScript, one of the recommended way of declaring it is called as a single var pattern. Okay, so basically what you do is you use one var and replace all of this with a comma and use, right? Comma URL equal to require URL, right? URL equal to require URL. Now let's go here, restart the server, let's go back, reload the page. We got the page being served, right? And do we have any challenges on the server side? Nothing, right? That's the request that was made and you got the response. Very good. But how about this? So let us say index.html question mark id equal to 100. Now do you still get it? Of course you do. Right? You still get the response back. Okay. Now how about calculator? So we'll say calculator, just the calculator question mark. It says the requested resource is not a static resource. Right? The requested resource is not a static resource. Now what we have done is we have added a small check in our application to make sure that if the resource requested is a static resource server, otherwise we will decide how we want to deal with that, but for now, right, we have stopped at that point. Any questions? I will check in the code. This. Don't say. See. This is making server. Supposed to be this again. Okay, code is checked in, so in case if you want to have a look at it, please do. Alright, so I'm assuming that you don't have any questions. So let me slightly refactor this code a little bit. Okay, so look at this. Do we need this variable? Are we using this anywhere else except this? So for readability, you can maintain it. And let's come here. I don't need this console.log resource, and I will remove the comments that we had. and this also I'll remove. And we don't seem to have anything else doing with the stream. So what I can do, I can combine. So fs dot create read stream dot pipe to the response, right? So this is a lot more pretty straightforward, right? Otherwise, simply write out status code, and we are good, right? So in a few lines of code, we have managed to extract this. Okay, very good. Now, what we want to do, what happens if the request is for slash calculator, right? What happens if the request is for slash calculator? So if it is for slash calculator, so most likely you will expect the request is like slash http colon slash slash right? So slash slash localhost 1990 slash calculator question mark operation is equal to add ampersand n1 equal to 100 ampersand n2 equal to 200, right? So if the URL is like this, let us try to parse it. We did already, but once again let us try to do it. Now node, I'll say where URL string is equal to this variable, this value, and then let's say where result is equal to required of URL dot parse this URL string. Right? Now look at the result. So when you look at the result, right, you have everything. But how will I extract these values? Right? What is the operation? What is N1? What is N2? How will I extract these values? Now where do you have them? You have them in the query attribute, right? You have them in the query attribute. Now how will I parse this guy? Right? Now there is once again another API called query string, right? So you can use it to parse that. So if you look at this one, right? So where QS is equal to require query string, right? Require query string. So what is query string? Query string is an object, and what does it has? It has a method called parse. Okay, it has a method called parse. Now look at this. QS.parse, I'll say result.query. Now when I say QS.parse result.query, you see what you get. Oops, sorry. Result. It is result.query. What do you get? You get an object containing all the attributes and their values, right? So this makes your job a lot more easy. Now, if you want to do this, you can do it. There is no problem with that. But there is a much better shortcut way of doing it. What is it? I'll show you. So we have the URL string, right? So we have the URL string. Now you know what you can do? Now you know what you can do? You can say where result is equal to URL.parse comma the URL string comma true, right? There is a second argument that you can pass whether it is true or false, and based on that you can that tells whether the query string need to be parsed or not. So if you say true, by default the value is false, but if you say true, what you actually mean is not only you parse the URL but also parse the query string part of it. Okay, now look at the result. You'll find that the query is no more just a string, it is an actual object, right? Which is an actual object, right? So now we can use this for we can use this for accessing the values and then process it. So how do you do that? Else, if it is not a static resource, right? We will check if it is for the calculator, right? So if the requested URL dot path name is equal to slash calculator, right? Then what am I supposed to do? if it is a calculator, then I have to do quite a few things. First and foremost, right? So what we will do, I will say pass the true value here, so that the query string is parsed and it is available here, requested URL.query string. And before I further proceed, I need the calculator, right? Before I further proceed, I need the calculator. So let me copy and paste the calculator file here, right? There has to be better ways of doing it. I'll show you how you can do that. So let me copy and paste the calculator code here in our application, and let me load it. So here we'll say comma calculator is equal to require dot calculator, right? Require dot slash calculator. Now close this, right? So now we have the calculator. Now what I can do, get the operation. So we'll say where data is equal to requested URL dot query, right? This will contain the complete data. Now you can actually do this. You can say return an object containing the operation is query.op, okay, query.op, comma n1 is % of requested URL dot query dot n1, comma 10, comma n2 is equal to colon. So n2 is % of requested URL dot query dot n2, right, comma 10. Now we have the complete data neatly parsed and available as an object. Now all I have to do is I'll simply need to say where result is equal to calculator of operation, right? Why? Because if you look at our calculator, we have those methods add, subtract, multiply. So the user is, we are assuming that the user will pass the actual method names, right? So the method names will reach us. So that's what we are assuming here. Now calculator.op of n1 comma n2, and simply write that to the response. So we'll say response dot write the result and response dot end. We are done. We are done, right? Else I am simply going to say a 404. Okay, so response dot status code is equal to 404 and then response dot end, right? So if it is not a static resource and if it is not a request for dot slash calculator, I am simply going to say 404 and end. I think we are done. Now save this, go back, restart the server. Node server.js, we have a server listening on port number 1990. Now as for the calculator, let us verify if that works. So index.html, it worked perfectly fine. Now let us ask for the calculator and say calculator question mark op equal to add, n1 equal to 100, n2 equal to 200, hit it and it goes on and on and on. There is a problem. What is it? Calculator of op, sorry, it is data.op, right? It is data.op and data.n1 and data.n2, right? So run this. Let us go to the browser, hit the URL once again. You still get a similar problem. What is the problem? First argument must be okay. So response.write should be of type string. You cannot write numbers or any other type, any type data other than string. So if you are using response.write, you have to use strings. So we'll say toString, right? We will simply say toString. Let's come here, restart the server, go back, hit this. Most likely we get 300. Right? Now here say subtract and you get -100, and here multiply 100, 200, you have 20,000, and you say what is it? Divide, right? Now you have got 0.5. You got the result. Okay. Now what you can do? You can give a decent interface to the user so that he can do all this stuff. So how do you do that? Very simple. Let us create a simple HTML page. name it as calculator.html. Right, name it as calculator.html, and then let us create this into calculator. So this is calculator h1 calculator, and give dot content. What does it contain? It contains a text box, so label that says number 1, okay, and then a text box whose name equal to n1, and plus a label that says number 2, and the text box whose name is n2, okay, and then plus a label that says operation. Actually you need a form, so we need a form, so I'll simply say form. Form, and action is equal to / calculator. That is where I want to submit the data containing all these things. Okay, so operation, and this will contain select, right? Multiply, how many options? We want multiple options, so we want 4 options, and then we need a button, right? So we need a button, so I'll say a div containing a submit button, value equal to submit, right? We need a value equal to submit. So we have a complete HTML generated, and all I have to do is just give these values appropriately. So the name for this is OP, right? Because that is what we are expecting on the server side. So the name will have the actual identifier that you want to use when the data is sent to the server. Now here we will define the options. So we'll say this is add, and this is subtract, and this is multiply, and this is divide. Right? Now save this. Now let us run this file, then let us serve this file. So we'll ask for calculator.html. Will it give me? It will give me, because we have already written the code, right? We have already written the code for serving any static file. Let us define a style sheet. We'll say label is display colon block, so that it looks a little this. So save this. Let's go back, reload this. Right? Now here you enter 1000, 2000 and select subtract or multiply, whatever it is. Click submit. You got the data. Why? Because instead of typing the whole data in the URL, you have given the user a HTML page where he can enter the data. So he selects multiply and click submit. Now instead of you typing it, the browser collects the data from the HTML and sends it. So now what we have done is a very primitive web server with app server functionality. Right? Now what we have to do, we have to make sure that this is done as a post request. Right? We need to make sure that this is done as a post request. So how are you going to handle a post request? How you are going to extract the data from the request, and how you are going to perform the operation. And then what if I want to send the response in HTML? Right? What if I want to send the response in HTML? So those are all some of the things that we will do tomorrow. Right? But for now, I'm going to end at this. Now, here is the assignment for you. What I want you to do is, look at this server.js. It is doing too many things, is that not? Right? It checks whether it is a static resource. If it is a static resource, then it is done in one way. If it is a calculator, then it is processed in a different way. And if it is not both of them, right, it returns a status code 404, right? So everything is done in one file, and there are too many if-else conditions, and this is bad, right? See, Node APIs are very, very simple. They are pretty straightforward, and once you get a glimpse of what are the APIs, you can very easily guess, right? When you face a challenge, you can very easily guess whether a particular API would be there or not, and if it is there, you can directly use it. The challenge is not APIs. The challenge is how you organize your code in Node. Okay, so that is the most important challenge. That is the most important, the difficult thing that you learn by practice. So what I want you to do is this: refactor this code. I don't want this code to be so ugly, right? That it is doing too many things. I don't want it to do too many things. I want it to do only one thing, right? And you decide what that one thing is, and then you split into you break this logic, right? This 25 lines of logic into small components that share very distinct responsibilities. You connect all of them together to offer a complete application, right? So let us see how you modularize your code before you come tomorrow. So you have a mail ID. It is there in GitHub. So drop me a mail in case if you have done it, so that I can have a look at it and we will discuss your approach tomorrow, right? Any questions? I'm done for the day. Good. So I'll upload the video tomorrow morning and I'll check in the code right now. So let me do it right now. So why is it not saying this? Okay, so the complete code is checked in. Did you find today's session useful? Thank you. Right. So let me know. Let me know in case if something can be changed. If we have to do something, we'll do it. Okay. So attempt modularizing this code. Attempt breaking it into small chunks and see how you can connect the dots to create a complete application. Just give it a shot, and we will discuss your solution and as well as my solution tomorrow. Right. Thank you guys. Have a nice day or good night.